Hi, this is Jason with Green Star Productions, and in this video you're going to watch me take a stick, a miniature dragon, and a few molds and some epoxy resin, and I turn a plain old interesting stick into this dashing little pimp cane. Alright, here we go. And here's the interesting stick. I'd stripped the vine off of it at this point, and I just decided to take some of the bark off of it just to give it a nice smoother look, but I didn't want to take all of it off, as you see, just to keep it interesting. Provides a nice contrast with the paint job I did on it later, as you'll see. So it looks a little rough, a little unfinished, but that was the whole idea. And as you'll see here in just a second, after I cleaned it up like this, it comes up just a little short. So I knew I was going to have to figure out something to do with it. And here you see the first attempt I had to fill the vine's gap with some pigmented resin. It's just a nice sapphire blue pigment I had on hand. I just smashed all that in there with some epoxy, let it dry, and then I sanded it off, as you see in this next shot. And I was still at this point trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to lengthen this thing? So I looked at, what molds and what other things I had on hand that I could use to extend the stick. And eventually I ran across something from another project I was going to work on in the future. I do still like the way it's warped and turned sideways. And here's the resin that I'm going to use. There's some clear and some blue pigmented and the antique copper that I'd let set aside. Here's the test I'd done. Now this is a shot glass mold that's originally intended to use to make cookie shot glasses for parties and all those sorts of occasions. But I thought, hey, this could be fun. So I picked it up. And I thought, hey, and I did a little quick measurement. It's like, oh, hey, this will work to make a nice little foot cap, and then I can extend the head this way too. And as you can see, that's the first layer of that's actually the blue and the copper that's in there. They've been setting out long enough at this point that they weren't going to mix together. So I just poured in some clear, a couple more dabs of the copper and blue, put it in the pressure pot overnight, and here you see me demolding it. And I missed my mark on this one, so I'm trying to show the shot glass to the top of the camera. But I get a better shot here in a minute, and I realized that I managed to get my arm lined up correctly so I could get some video. There we go. Much better. See, that was exactly the effect I was going for. The swirls and the clear, so it looks kind of like, so it still looks liquid, almost like a lava lamp. This one I'd cast it a little short because I knew I was going to have to cut a hole in one of them to extend the stick far enough. And it's the tricky part of adjusting the height, because if I'd stack the two just on top of each other, just on top of the stick, it was going to be too tall, and I'd have to cut it down, and I hate wasting the time in epoxy doing that. And here's the stick, and here I am casting the foot on the stick on the cane, so I just turned the same mold upside down, poured in some more copper and blue, and let it set up overnight after I taped it up with a Dremel stand to keep the stick upright. Not the best shot here. I should have turned the camera sideways. And here's the stick after I've put the two top caps on, and I'm filling the void in it with resin so I don't run a risk of snapping it off or having the top come off. And given the thickness of the epoxy I work with, I had to pour a little in, let it sink down, pour a little more in. So it took me a good 30-45 minutes just to fill this void up, and to avoid any, if it had degassed any and it had run over, I'd set it over some parchment paper. And here you get to see me playing with my new angle grinder for the first time. Sorry, not angle grinder, this is my bench grinder. So I just roughly shaped it with this, and just to get a feel for the new tool and to get this thing into a good shape without wearing my arm out trying to do this with a palm sander or a sanding glove or anything like that. And it's a fine line you have to work with, fine line working with when you're doing the DIY videos. You have to show enough of what you're doing to give viewers the basic idea of what you're doing, but you don't want to bore them and lose their attention. So I've sped this up considerably. And not wanting a lot of sharp edges, of course, I just file those off and get it roughly in the shape that I wanted. And problem you have with a bench grinder like this is that the stones are really coarse, so you end up with if I had just put it on the bench grinder and then just poured more epoxy over it, I knew I was going to end up with a really rough looking handle, and I wasn't going to be real happy with it. So, and after I do this rough shaping here, make sure I get all the flash off and try to get it as straight as I can. I'm going to go over it with a palm sander and get a much finer shape and get out a bunch of the gouges that had come out with the grinder wheel. They're both in pretty good shape. And the other fun part with doing grinding like this is that you do end up seeing any places that you've missed or gaps that you need to fill with epoxy later on. This is just a 120 grit piece of sandpaper I'm using on this one, just because it's a nice finish sandpaper that gives me fine enough scratches that I know that it'll be filled when I do the top coat of epoxy. So again, I just go over the whole thing again after I'd rinse it off, get it in its final shape. And as you see here, there's a small gap where I had joined the two full shot glasses together on the top end, but I wasn't too concerned. That was a thin, shallow enough gap that I knew it was going to be covered by the epoxy. And it's just me rolling it across the surface, trying to make sure that it's as centered as I could get it. And as the card says, I forgot to set up the camera when I was casting the top sphere and putting the painted strip on with some symbols that I just cooked up just to make it more interesting. And here's the initial pictures I took the day I finished it after the epoxy had all dried out. And I was just so excited, and the adrenaline was up and running, and I thought, all right, let me get some pictures now while I'm still excited and I can get some really good shots of it. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong time of day and the wrong lighting conditions, so it comes out a little blurry. But, yeah, hey, these are things we do when we get excited. Not the greatest shot here, obviously. It does show that the stick is still nice and warped, though. And I do like the angle I managed to get with this. I just leaned this against my sink. And here's the final shots that I took with some better lighting conditions. This is a close-up of the sphere at the top. And here's the painted copper strip with the invented symbols. I just always have loved the contrast of a bright blue with the metallic copper this way. And another close-up of the dragon and the sphere. As you see, I kind of took the end off of his nose. And that'll do it. And read the title card. And thanks everybody for watching. And hope to see you all sometime soon. Bye.